Water Committee will come to order, please. We have a big day today, so let's get to it. First order of business is Senate Bill 358. I will open the hearing on, and I'll ask the reviser to give us a quick overview.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee Senate Bill 358 should look very familiar to you, since it is the exact same bill as House Bill 2480 that we heard previously and passed out of this committee. Senate Bill 358 would allow the financing for public water supply system infrastructure projects that acquire water through water transfer. If you'll remember, it kind of deals with the public water supply loan fund, and that fund's used to provide loans to municipalities for projects to replace drinking water infrastructure systems. However, current law doesn't allow those projects to be used, or those funds to be used for projects relating to a water transfer. What the bill would do is eliminate that restriction and allow money from the fund to be utilized for water transfers, for projects involving water through a water transfer. And Senate Bill 358 passed on the Senate on the consent calendar 40-0. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for the reviser? Seeing none. Thank you, Chris. As stated, this is the exact same bill that we had and we put on the consent calendar. So with that, we have how many written testimony? 3 written testimonies. They're in your folder to review. Do I have any further discussion at this point? If not, do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we suspend the rules and pass this out favorably.
And it's seconded by Representative Murphy, and this requires 2/3 vote to approve. So all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. It passed unanimously. So we are now open for discussion on the motion to pass this out favorably. Seeing no discussion, you may close on your motion.
I close.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion passes. We'll now go to the House floor. Thank you all for that. Now, we move on to House Bill 2686. And as advertised, I think I'll go to the podium and start going through the documents, the reasoning, and the rationale for what we did, why we did it. The first thing you were handed out was the overall reorganization. And in the lower right hand, you'll see what we did back in January of last year. That is the color code for the 16 different agencies. And I asked for one additional one. And if you'll look at the back of your packet, the one that has the all of them in the that's the one we looked at, and if you'll look down, you'll see that in the columns, if you have more than one color, you have a little bit of a problem of over supervision if you want. And so we tried to change that. We reorganized. And at the top, you'll see we have created, let me back up a little bit. Since last year, the vice chair, the ranking member, myself, all of the staff, and the agencies have been working together on this. And we worked all through the summer and all through the fall. And Chris has been a very busy person obviously, with all of this. I don't know how many pages it ended up, but it's a bunch. And the reorganization created a lot of that, changing the references and all the statutes and so forth. But we created a secretary. One of the problems we noticed when we were going through all of this is that the water programs have been underfunded for years. And part of the reason for that is you don't have somebody at the seat at the table when budget discussions occur. So that was part of the reasoning for doing this, and primarily for budgetary. And I see that position one as a fiduciary primarily, but also we noticed as we went through all of this through the year that finding information was a little bit troublesome at times. So this office will be the clearinghouse for all information associated with water. The dotted lines, those organizations do not report to the secretary, but they will be providing information, and they will field questions as the secretary's office sends those out. So it's primarily one, a fiduciary and information. Under that, we have three major divisions that have been not created, just common sense how we organized them. What used to be the water office, we're now calling the Division of Water and Environmental Planning. A lot of the duties do not change, but we made that a director position because the water is so important to our state. We do not want to be in the same situation that Nevada and California are in, so we have to do something now, and we can't wait on this. And the funding, we have to work on the funding or we will be without water in the near future. Secondly, we have the Division of Environment and Conservation. The money flows into that area. It made common sense for us to put those under there as you see them. And then the last would be the Division of Water Resources. That remains the same. What we've done there, and to clear up some misconception, the appeal process remains the same. That does not change. What we've done was made that director more self-sufficient in that they no longer report to a secretary for approval for any of the rules and so forth that come forth. Now, rules and regs will obviously have to be go through the secretary for review. But as far as the power, it remains the same. Each one of these virtually remain the same, except that we've reorganized to where there's less of this confusion of who to talk to and where to go. Any questions on that at this point? So now to offset the creation of the Secretary's office, I asked where all the officers were all around the state of all these different agencies and organizations. And that's the last thing you should see in your folder, that map. So we have put in the bill that the Secretary will reorganize all of that and combine those offices to save space and money. And we've given them 5 years because we learned that some have 5-year leases still in place. Some actually own their building and will have to work on selling the building if needed, whatever that. But they have 5 years to reorganize those offices so that anyone in the state knows where they go to find information. Now the fees. We're all aware of the amount of money that was lost over the past years, upwards of $80 million because of the lack of funding. Representative Riley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just before you go on to the fees, I would just have a concern that the Secretary would concentrate all of their buildings and everything to the metropolitan areas. I would like to make sure that the Secretary would be very concerned to make sure that at least a good part of those buildings or a building or something is in our rural areas on the western part of the state. Thank you.
I think we're all in agreement on that. They will have to be spread out across the state. But they'll be regional. And I may have to ask the revisor if it's stated in there that they will remain regional throughout the state. Good point.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as how specific it is, it just requires the secretary to maintain offices and facilities to carry out the functions of the department in other locations of the state. So besides the main office in Topeka, that's the only guidance for where the offices are located.
We may want to think about tightening it up a little bit. Now, we understand we didn't have the money to do all the things we need to do, and the worst part of all this we found was that there wasn't enough money to do any matching with federal funds, so we left a lot of federal funds on the table. We never got those funds because we could not match them. They did not have the money. So what we're trying to do here is to put some money into the system so that we can have those funds to capture the federal funds, but also we have learned of many projects, and we'll discuss these at great length at some point, and we've done this over and over again about the silting into the dams and everything else. We will have to put some money in this, and the technology farms with the irrigation, we have to have some seed money to help those folks move ahead and do the conservation that this requires. Both ends of the state. Nobody's left out on this. So the fees. This was difficult. We fought long and hard on this one. But everybody in the state will have to be involved with raising some funds so that we can manage this program. Now, the municipalities, the rural water, the stock waters, and I think that's it on that side, they have a water protection fee. Oh, and industry. Industry, municipalities, stock waters, and rural water. All of those receive their water, and they charge a fee then when they use that water. So that's been 3 cents since what year? 1989 was the last time. That's when that fee was put in. And that's 3 cents per 1,000 gallons of use. We're raising that 2 cents to 5 cents. Now, on the other side, the irrigators, and we learned through this process that the GMDs have the bulk of the irrigators within their areas, and they're charging the fees and so forth to do their job. But we found that there were quite a few irrigators living outside of GMDs, and we're outside the system, essentially. So we have to bring everybody in. So all irrigators will be charged $25 minimum, and up to 250 maximum. So if you use 250 acre feet, you get charged at $25. And it just scales up from there to a maximum of 250. And those funds then generate between $6 and $8 million. Now, one of the criticisms that we did here was that the municipalities and the irrigators say, well, we don't want to be the only ones playing in this sandbox. And so we will have an amendment coming, I believe Representative Vaughn will bring that one, to where we will have a direct deposit coming from the SGF into the water fund. And that will be put into what we've created, a trust fund, to eliminate or to hold off as best we can any sweeping of those funds. So it ends up being about equal. What all the municipalities and the irrigators put in, that will be equalized by the amount of money that we're drawing down from the state. And that's all being put into that trust fund at that point. And those funds will be used to handle all the projects that we need to do, or at least seed them early on until we get the funds generated enough to where, one is the pilot project you've all heard about at Tuttle Creek Dam. We lack $150,000 of having that complete on the state side, and we're asking that through the Appropriations Committee, the subcommittee on that one. But we also want to be able to help the irrigators to bring their systems up to speed to the new technology that's available. We learned as we went out to Garden City, and we've learned also in testimony, that saving anywhere from 20 to 40% of the water use with equal or higher yields, which was astonishing to me. But so it does work. So conservation is going to be a big key. We need to help that, and we need a cost share program to help them change over to those systems. Conservation is going to be the key all across the state. We learned that the water tables out west are diminishing rapidly, and we need to do something. We need to do it fairly soon. Some areas, I think it was Wichita County we looked at, they may have less than 10 years left. And so we need to do something, and we need to help them as much as we can. But we have to have some of the funds to do that. I mentioned, and Victoria's not here yet, she's the one that created this for us. But this chart gives you an idea of the funds. The proposed funding chart. In the upper left, and we've called the trust fund the Water Environment Maintenance Fund. It will be managed by a board, and within the bill it states who will be members of that board. The secretary will be the chair of that board, but they will decide where most of the funding goes. Now, the current water office, now to be renamed the Water and Environmental Planning, their funding remains the same. It will be separated, but in a sub-account within that trust fund. There'll be a board. New fees will be established. That's the green, the water rights fees. And up above in the yellow, those fees will be increased. Those go from 3 cents to 5 cents per thousand. Water rights fees, as I explained, 25 to 250. The secretary then will be responsible for dealing with the legislature and the governor's office, and with annual reports and keeping everybody up to speed on what water is doing in our state. This is critical. We spent this amount of time on it because everybody feels it's that important. Our future absolutely, in my opinion, is at stake here. So we have to do something. And this was our plan. This is what we came up with. Now, the GMDs. They have a job to do. We recognize that. And we did not want to hamper those efforts. But what we did do, after conversations with many people out in these areas, that, did you hear that? Let me turn this off. I get spam calls every 5 minutes. Anyway, back to the GMDs. They're doing their job. We want to help them do their jobs. But we found out one thing after we talked to a lot of people across the state. The folks that are involved in those GMDs, but they are not irrigators, are not on the board. They don't have a say in the system. So we designed a system where anyone living within that GMD can be a member of the board and get involved and have a voice. And then the other thing we did was we've asked them to come to the legislature because they're dealing with taxpayer dollars. We've asked them to come in and explain to us what programs they've done in the last year, where the money went, where it came from, and so forth, just to give us, the legislature, an idea of what they're doing and how they're doing it and what it's costing. And if, as a state, if we need to turn around and help them in any way, we'll have a better idea how we can help them. Basically, that was the reasoning and why we did what we did and put this bill together. So at this point, do you have any questions? Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm hearing kind of from my local GMD, there's a little heartburn over that aspect of it simply because so many people over the years, land has sold. They don't live within the GMD, but they certainly have a vested interest. And so the number of people who actually live there in irrigators versus the people who maybe don't live there and are irrigators, they feel like that's going to create a problem. See what I'm saying?
What are the limitations on that, the membership? Do you recall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, that's also something that I've heard, and I think it's something we could address as a committee. Currently, I think you'll see in the side-by-side comparison, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but board members and the qualified electors have to have a water right or have 40 acres of land or more currently in order to be on the board and to vote. This would change it so that any citizen within the parameters of the GMD who is an eligible voter would vote or be on the board. And I think, if I'm understanding correctly, the idea is that industries or irrigators right now who have water rights and are operating in the GMD but do not physically live there would then not be able to be on the board or vote. So that is something we could talk about as a committee.
Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the fees that are concerned to pay for the additional spending for the state water programs, was there any consideration given to potentially paying for all the increase in spending by transferring money from the state general fund to pay for all of that, considering that we have a large, about $3 billion surplus at the moment?
Yes, we have been clamoring at the doors, but as I said before, the agencies don't have a seat at the table, and so they were essentially left out of the conversation. But those of us have been talking to budget committees. I've talked to both appropriations chair and the Ways and Means chair, trying to get them thinking along that line to get some more money. And yes, we have requested some funding through that, but as you know, everybody wants a piece of that, and so we'll see where it all shakes out. But for the long term, and that, you know, looking at it as a one-time thing, if we get any of it at all, for the long term, we will need to have a flow of funding to keep this going. But I understand what you're saying, and we've been working on it. And if you have some inside people that you know, then get in their ear. Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For a visual kind of thing, would it be appropriate for the research to give us a pie chart of the things you're seeing here so that we can kind of visualize the proposed SGF funds that's going to be a part of all of this, how much is going to be from fees broken down by the 3 different fees, and then if there was any grants or anything that was proposed. So I know that that was a big factor when we were looking at all the different departments, that, you know, there was a big chunk of each one of their pies was a grants. So if we could just pull all of that stuff together into some kind of a visual pie chart to see what this is going to look like, especially with SGF funds after we're all kind of done. Thanks.
Okay, I think we can do that, a pie chart, and then also a listing. All of the agencies presented to us a listing of the money they need and then whether or not they could apply for government funding. And so we'll need that along with the pie chart to visualize where the money's going and where it's coming from. We can do that. Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things, I think it's clear that the groundwater management districts are pretty much dominated by irrigators now, and this new plan kind of flips that a bit. And I think the concern that I'm hearing is that it kind of goes the opposite way now to municipal users, and maybe, and I don't know what the answer is, but maybe there's a way we can kind of balance that a bit. I mean, that's something I think we might want to look at as we dig into this deeper.
I think that concern has been voiced loud and clear, and that's something that we can deal with, yes. So if you have an amendment in mind, get it ready. Any other? Representative Orr, please.
Mr. Chairman, we've talked about this before. I have never seen a fund in a state that is sweep-proof and this really does concern me. I think unless we have a magic formula, and I would like to hear your opinions on how we can prevent such a fund being swept.
Well, if it was not under a secretary, I think the chances are better that it'll be swept. But if you have a secretary that's kicking and screaming, the chances are less. Plus, we put a board over this trust fund, so if it's going to be swept, that board would have to approve that. It would be difficult, but as you stated, nothing's impossible around here. We all know that. But we've designed it as best we can within the laws of the state. Let's put it that way. Representative Stogsdill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, you had mentioned, you said we left a lot of federal funds on the table because we didn't have the required matching funds. Do we have any idea approximately how much in federal funds we have left on the table? And secondly, if we have the matching funds, do we have any estimate on what kind of funding we could be looking at coming in from the federal government to help out on this?
Does the agency have an answer? Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earl Lewis, Department of Agriculture. I don't know that we have a complete list of the number of opportunities we've missed out on over the years. A lot of the federal matching grant funds are typically a 50-50 match. There's some that are better than that. We get 75% federal, 25% non-federal. A lot of those are cost share programs, for example, through NRCS or some of those. So we don't necessarily have that because, again, once you don't have the money and you just kind of don't document that, you miss the opportunity, frankly. But I think we know that there are literally millions of dollars that the federal government in again, USDA, Bureau of Reclamation, Corps of Engineers, EPA, all the water agencies that we are really not getting enough of, frankly.
Yeah, it just looked like to me that if we're talking about where we're going to get our funding, especially taking money out of the state general fund, it would be nice to know if we had some kind of idea of how much maybe we could have coming in federal funding. Looks like that would make a real impact on whatever budget we're looking at.
We can ask the agencies, maybe if they can give us a rough outline of how much money we've left on the table, how much we need to capture those funds. Is that basically what we're saying?
Yes.
Well, we'll ask them and see what they can come up with.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just an idea for the committee, going back to the previous discussion about who has a say-so in that voting. I would just propose maybe that we would say owners of parcels in that area. So therefore, the county clerk knows who owns parcels in each one of those counties or areas or whatever. And so therefore, just instead of it being a general, anybody that can vote being part of that, it would be people that own land in that area. So therefore, the people that are outside of that district that actually own parcels of land that are irrigating in that area, they would have say-so over that land. So I'd use the word parcels. Thank you.
I wonder about that one, land ownership to vote. We dealt with that one time in our history. What we could do, though, is maybe say a water user, something like that. I don't know. We'll think that through, and we'll ask Representative Murphy and you and some others, put your heads together and maybe come up with an explanation on that. Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add an additional consideration to this topic, and I think it's a great topic to discuss. The GMDs do levy taxes on the people who are eligible voters. So whoever we incorporate into that category would then be assessed for those taxes. So I think it's something that I've been thinking about a lot too, and something that we might consider as well as we evaluate that. Thank you.
I'd advise you all to get your heads together and come up with a compromise on that we can present. Further questions? I'm weak, but I'm not dead. I still have some fight left in me. Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do applaud the concept of bringing all of the entities involved into the funding structure. I do have a little concern on the makeup of the GMD boards. It'd be nice if we had some type of representation from Stockwater and industry and municipals and the irrigators on those boards. And I see where the GMDs don't always follow county lines. And so if you get into a general election for board members, you're going to be doing partial counties, especially out west in the groundwater areas. So there's lots of things, little details there. I know there's a little heartburn about stacking the boards and GMDs. It would be nice if we had some type of guidelines. I've searched through the state boards, and I can't find another good example to copy, I guess. If someone has one, I'd love to see it. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
It's a complicated issue, really. Now, the county clerks are used to this because our districts, for example, go into different counties, and they know which precincts are where and all of that. They can handle it. It's just whatever compromise we come up with that is fair and gives a voice to those that are not irrigators. We don't want them packing the board, obviously, but we want them to have a voice. So whatever compromise we can come up with on that would be good. Further? Being too easy now. Representative Boyd, do you have anything to add to the conversation at this time?
No, I don't, Chairman.
Representative Vaughn, did I forget anything?
No, I don't think so. That was excellent, Mr. Chair. I look forward to working together as a committee on this issue. Thank you.
Okay. Well, what's going to happen starting tomorrow is the hearing. We'll do the proponents first. I've had one opponent request to be on Wednesday, so we'll go through the proponents first. We'll close that portion of the hearing and we'll hear one opponent, and then on Thursday we'll hear the rest of the opponents and the neutrals. Because of the numbers, we may have to limit some of the time that they're allowed to speak, but we want to give everybody a chance to speak. And as always, we ask that everything be written so that we can have it and we can read it and we can digest it and think about it. So that's Wednesday and Thursday. Now, during the hearing process, that's when committee members ask the questions of the conferees to get settled in their mind those things they aren't clear on and they want to get clear on. It is not a time for pontificating or talking about the bill itself. The hearing process is a time when you get your answers that you want. Then on Friday, we will have our own committee discussion. And that's where we'll have our discussions between ourselves and maybe work out some of these details. And if those that have amendments, get them ready, because on Monday we will meet and we'll work the bill. That's our last day as a committee to work. Although it's blessed, we want to get it done so that we can get it over to the Senate. So that's the plan as of today. And that's what will appear on the agendas that are out on the walls and in the publications. So any questions on that? Thank you all very much. We'll see you tomorrow.